Hello and welcome to Westwind, an audio podcast about cancer, technology in medicine, and policy issues. I'm host and medical oncologist Dr. Jack West from the City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center in the Los Angeles area. You can find Westwind material at BeaconMedIC, one word.com, at iTunes, or just about anywhere you get podcast content. I would just ask that you show your interest and support by subscribing, commenting, sharing by telling friends and colleagues in person and on social media, and rating it however you feel is appropriate. You can also share your ideas and opinions by emailing us at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. We're continuing our discussion with lung cancer advocacy leader Chris Draft, as well as lung cancer survivor Tabitha Paccione in this second episode. Tabitha, you're part of the ALK-positive group, and that is an online, very strong confederation, this really strong group of people who are doing very well and highlight how well people can do. And to get back to Chris's point about not seeing enough survivors, I think one of the challenges of the lung cancer community historically has been that there had not been enough long-term survivors, and the few there were scattered to the winds and not as galvanized. I think that, Chris, one of the things that you've done really well is putting survivors front and center for people to see as examples and counter some of their assumptions.
Well, and that, so our message is changing the face of lung cancer. So again, critically first is accepting, what do people know? Again, we don't have to like it. We don't have to like it at all, but we have to be honest about what is the baseline that we're trying to change. And then we go from there. So what do people know? They know smoking, they know some basic environmental, they know only prevention, and they think it's only somebody that smoked that's been in those arenas. So the idea that it could be anyone else, that it could be anyone, they weren't told. And so we knew that our message had to be that anyone can get it, but it can't be something that you just say. You have to back that up with visual aids. So my wife is clearly an example that anyone can get it, but her by herself is one person. And as one person, you can seem like an exception to the rule. You can seem like, maybe it was her, and they can feel bad for me, like there's a black cloud over my house. But not that it really could happen. And so what we essentially did is said, we got to go make a case. There's been a 50-year campaign that says this can't happen to you. So we've got to go now start a campaign that says, yes, it can. It can happen to you. It can happen to you. And then within that prevention's not enough. So research matters. So it's not just good enough to tell somebody and scare them and say it can happen to them, but also really show them that research matters, and where we see people that are doing well like Tabitha, that it works. So not just, hey, let's just put money at it, but know that the money that's been going at it is actually working, and let us show you some of the examples of that we're building off of. So again, Tabitha, you can talk about some of the things that you've been able to do that are because of this, being on the targeted therapy. I mean, what are some of those amazing things with hanging out with your family?
Yeah, I mean, this targeted therapy has changed everything that I thought that I could accomplish being a patient with lung cancer. Mm-hmm. I was able to take a 12-day road trip with my kids. We went to Mile High Stadium in Denver. I was able to climb the steps and be able to breathe. I'm still able to go to all the games. I'm still able to teach. Mm-hmm. So this targeted therapy that came along with all the research and the things that we need allows me to have a normal life. I still get to be a mom. I still get to be a teacher. I still get to be a friend. I don't have to be home sick.
What has being part of that online community meant for you?
Well, so I struggled a lot in the beginning, partly because I was the product of that generation of people that didn't understand, that didn't know. And like Chris said, if you don't know, we can't blame you because we've been trained in this process and we have this mindset. So when I was diagnosed, you would not believe the amount of people, everybody, I'm so sorry. How long have you smoked? Mm-hmm. And at first, that kind of, it blindsided me because I wanted to be angry. And then I thought about it. I said, this is my opening. This is my moment to educate them, to let them really understand what changing the face of lung cancer is. So it's not just the smoker, it's me. Like, look at my face, because my face is also your mom's face and your sister's face and your neighbor's face and your best friend. This is who lung cancer is. And it's everybody, it's not just me, because really in my community when I first was diagnosed, was probably the only person that had lung cancer that was young. But now, being able to advocate and being able to be part of these communities and just kind of get out there and help people to understand, there are people that are in my community that are diagnosed with lung cancer, and they come to me and they're like, I understand now. I've never smoked and I have lung cancer, so I get what you're going through. And so I think, it's definitely us educating them and changing how they see lung cancer, but it's also us letting them understand that it's anybody and it's everybody. And I realized that when I went to Washington, D.C. for the longevity conference, the very first time. I remember I walked into the room and there were 400 people, different races, different ages, different parts of the country, also different, but also similar to me. And so I'm looking at these people, I'm like, I'm not the only one that has lung cancer. Look at all these people that, we represent all these people. And so when I remember putting it on Facebook, and it was like this giant group picture, and I got between 10 or 15 comments from people. Wow, that's a lot of people that have lung cancer. Yes, 1 in 16. This is anybody you can know, because anyone with lungs can get lung cancer, not just the smokers. Mm-hmm. And it's so important that people know that. And then it's so important that they can look at us and understand that, okay, this is why we need the research. This is why we need the funding, because your neighbor or your mom or your sister has lung cancer. Well, with this research, they can live a normal life and they can still participate with their family and they can still work and still enjoy the time, whatever time it may be. But those communities also really, really helped. It's a connection that we have. It's not just, the information that we get being part of the ALK-positives. It's also celebrating our victories and, sharing in our losses. We've lost so many people this year. And looking back, we can let that discourage us, or we can allow that to push us harder, to fight harder for those people and honor them and everything that they've given and everything that they fought for.
That's great. Chris, I've been impressed by some of how you think about and express how football brings people together from lots of different communities, all under a common flag. Yeah. Can you articulate again some of this concept of football as a good vehicle for awareness and bringing people together?
Well, I'll give you two sides as it relates to football. And so the first one is the importance of team. And what I saw at the beginning of this battle after my wife passed in terms of advocacy is I saw a bad team in terms of lung cancer. I saw a team that didn't agree upon what our goals were and weren't honest about where we actually stood. And so I went to 60 cancer centers in the first year after my wife passed, and it was important to understand, if we were saying there's a lack of awareness in terms of research, then where does that awareness come from? Well, not when it comes, American Cancer Society, CDC, these are influential groups, and American Lung in the public space, but then individual hospitals are critical to that too. So I went to each one of them to find out what is happening, from a communications, PR and marketing, development. Do you guys know that lung cancer research matters? So I know we've got docs, we know we got researchers in all these places, but in that cancer center, do they know that lung cancer matters? Because that's the key to lung cancer awareness. And then at the same time, I wanted to go about and I wanted to thank docs like you, because I know that the innovation that is happening, and granted, again, my wife didn't benefit from EGFR and ALK and definitely was tested for them, but anything that happened any changes that happen would only happen because people were willing to go to work. And so when they were saying that there are things that, oh, it's terrible, it's bad, and I said, well, you know what, then I've got people that were willing to stand up when it was bad and fight. Those are some good people, right? Now we got to encourage them and make sure along that way. So I'm saying that, so football internally says that we have to encourage it. Yes, we're in a war, we've got to accept it, we accept the limitations that we have, we accept who's on our team, figure out who those people are, and then we have to have a common goal, and that common goal comes from the honesty that says we have not told people clearly that research matters. We haven't done that. We haven't made it clear that anyone can get it, right? So changing the face of lung cancer was about being very direct about what we need, and that is, we know it's prevention. We know that people don't know that they can get it, and so we need to make sure they know that early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship matters. And so then the question is, how do we get the message to the people that anyone can get it and that research matters and the other components? How do we do that? They said, well, I got the #1 sport in America. And again, if we recognize historically that people have heard a message for 50 years, so it's not like we're going to say it one time and then it's going to be all good. You know, ESPN reached out right after my wife passed away and said, can we do your story before the Super Bowl? Absolutely. And they did our story before the Super Bowl. That's one story. But one story is not going to be enough. We're in a war. And so how do you use this platform that is, again, the #1 sport in America? And so you say, well, how do you use it? It's recognize it. As the #1 sport in America, that means that more people watch it, more races, more socioeconomic groups watch it more than anything. And so it's an opportunity for us to send a message, a very strong message where people are tied together as a family. And so instead of us randomly yelling out that anyone can get it, the goal was through our Survivor Series was to identify survivors from those communities and make sure that they are kind of wearing their, if we're here in LA, wearing their Ram stuff. If they're in Atlanta, wearing their Falcon stuff. And so instead of us just saying that anyone can get it, what we're going to do is we're going to point to our survivor and say, anyone can get it because you can see this person. Anyone can get it because this Rams fan, this person from your community, anyone can get it because she's a teacher. Anyone can get it because she's got kids. Anyone can get it. So we had to make a case. And through the connection with the NFL, it makes it where that case is that much more, because once you say, here, it's a Rams fan, we now tackle, we get the whole Southern Cal community to stand up and say, what's happening over there? Right? So I think that's the greatness of the NFL platform. But it just backs up the fact that we've got to use every opportunity we have based on the fact there's been a 50-year campaign to educate the people. What are the ways that we can get to the people? We've got to find ways to use that wherever we can.
How receptive has the NFL been to the lung cancer community in this campaign, knowing that I think what's been most visible has been October breast cancer awareness and the pink cleats, and you know, that's so visible. And I got to say, I think many in the lung cancer community are envious of that kind of awareness, this Pinktober.
I know, and it's funny that I have to answer those questions about that, you know, because it's disappointing. It's disappointing because the real difference is the reason why there's more in terms of breast cancer is because the breast cancer community has fought for it.
Yeah.
It's not the NFL. The NFL didn't make the movement. They just supported it because some of their players were affected by breast cancer, and then the players were able to stand up and ask the NFL to do more, but it wasn't because the breast cancer community didn't do anything.
Right.
And so what I can tell you is in April of 2011, just to be honest as we're on the podcast, is I went to American Cancer Society with the blessing of the commissioner of the NFL, who's saying, Chris, after you meet with them, tell us what we can do. And I went to American Cancer Society and I said, my girlfriend was diagnosed with lung cancer. When she's ready, we want to work with you guys to raise money for lung cancer research. And they said, all we've got is the Great American Smokeout. Right? So how can you do more with the NFL when the commissioner is saying, I got you, and then their national sponsor doesn't say it, right? ESPN did our story before, did at the Super Bowl, reached out to American Lung Association. And again, I know I'm throwing some people under the bus, but I think it's so important for people to recognize is that I reached out to American Lung after my wife had passed. ESPN had reached out and said, well, American Cancer Society, they're not ready to say research matters out for the world to see. we have an opportunity. I'm about to shoot this video. It's going to play before the Super Bowl, the biggest event in America, the #1 media event in America. American Lung, will you kind of stand with us? And they said, all we got is facts. I said, well, come on, man, we've got the Super Bowl. And so I guess what I'm saying, so the disappointing thing is that somebody will point out that breast cancer has certain things, but breast cancer worked for those things. Breast cancer stood up. Breast cancer was unapologetic. Breast cancer said that research mattered. So I went to 60 cancer centers to say, all right, if we don't stand up in our cancer center, so every NFL team has a cancer center partner, and those cancer centers, because they're marketing partners, dictate what the NFL teams do. So even if American Cancer Society doesn't do it, where then the NFL, that's their national partner, that the cancer centers that drive, what the teams can do, if they make it a priority, the teams can still do it. So when somebody is disappointed that the NFL is not doing more as it relates to breast cancer, unfortunate for me, again, it's been disappointing because though it's directly related to the experts in the community's willingness to stand up and claim what we know is necessary. We're willing to say it to each other, but are we willing to stand up and yell it out to the people? Are we willing to hold people accountable as American Cancer Society as being the biggest public voice in terms of what people think about lung cancer? Are we going to hold CDC accountable for the consequences of just talking about prevention? Or are we going to just say, hey, there's a lack of research? Are we going to hold our cancer centers accountable for if they believe that this matters, then they need to talk about it, right? So I guess this to say the NFL has been supportive from the beginning. The NFL has been supportive so much that this past year when Patty Watkins was our Super Bowl challenge winner, she was on the 50-yard line, first row in the stadium. And because it was in Atlanta, and the NFL, again, was even supportive that our second place winner, they came to me and said, well, what do you think about your second place winner going to the Super Bowl? So Gina Hollenbeck, who's the president of ALK-positive, went to the Super Bowl too. Now, she wasn't at the 50-yard line. It was a different place in there. But the NFL, throughout this experience, have been completely supportive, so much so that Roger Goodell, in the midst of everything that's happening at the Super Bowl, when he sees me, he comes over, gives me a hug, and he says, is your survivor ready for the game? Because he was excited for her. Excited for her.
No, I think that's a great point, that all of what we see is reflective. It didn't just happen. It didn't just fall from the sky. These were hard-fought victories, and if anything, the lung cancer community can look to all of the success in the breast cancer community and look at that as a game plan and say, how do we get some of that?
And I think, and that's where it's critical. Are we willing to take a hard look at breast cancer and ask the question that is, even without a stigma, even, granted, when they first started, women's health actually had a little bit of a stigma to it, but even without a stigma, you have to be direct in terms of what you want, all right? And so breast cancer makes it clear that it's women. They show it, and they say, what do we need? Research. If we are just a little bit honest, we know that has not been the message with lung cancer. And so if it's a priority, then that's what we have to change. And it's not going to be somebody outside it. The person that changes it and yells it out will not be someone that doesn't know.
Yeah.
It takes people that know that research matters, and it really takes people that know that it works, because that's what makes you that much more confident that we need it.
Tabitha, how do you feel about the role of advocacy efforts? And obviously you have some historical perspective now coming on to 3 years, but not as long. I think that lung cancer has come a long way since 2010, 2011, certainly before that. I and many of my colleagues who have been in lung cancer for decades were in a field that was bleak enough that people would ask, why did you go into it? And with disbelief. And now, in a very favorable way, lung cancer is seen as one of the most dynamic areas and hopeful areas of all of cancer care. What's your perspective in terms of energy for advocacy these days?
These days, I feel like it's so important. When you look at breast cancer, you see all these faces, you see the women, you see how important they make it. And so I feel like, in several years now, we have so much success in the lung cancer area with cutting edge treatments and people living so much longer and having amazing lives. I feel like we need more of us, more of our faces out there. We need people to stand up and advocate for not only themselves, for everyone else that's going through it, but also for all those people that are going to be diagnosed. And I remember looking at, I think what changed my mind was I went into a room and I saw these people that were survivors for 3, 5, 10, 16 years. And I decided I want to be that person. I want to be the person that newly diagnosed patient looks to and says, 3 years, like that can be me. I can have 3 years. And so I think that we need more people to storm Capitol Hill and to just show our faces, because our faces are what matter. Our faces are what people are going to want to see, and then fight for more research, fight for more funding, fight for treatments. But if we're not standing up at the forefront of it, then it's not going to happen. It's really up to us.
It's so much, and that's what Tabitha said, it's up to us. And I think, again, one of the things that was disappointing to me from the beginning was recognizing that advocacy is not special in terms of a particular disease or a particular cause. When you see advocacy and you see change that happens, it comes from a core of people that are affected by something that's similar, that stand up together and are uncompromising in the fact that this matters. And I think within lung cancer, we just haven't made that clear enough. And that's why the survivors are so critically important, because we need people to have a sense of urgency that aren't going to wait, that are going to make it a priority, and they're going to make sure that it's clear, that it's right in front of it. And that's what we've been missing, is somebody's asking, well, how's it going to change? It's going to be us. How's this going to happen? It's going to be us. How is this group going to make it a priority? We are going to force them to make it a priority. And that's not anything special, because that's when you see a breast cancer, why were they successful? Not because people naturally supported them from the beginning, was because they stood up and were unwilling to stop standing up until it got changed.
And I think that it's really important for the various groups within lung cancer to be pulling in the same direction. We can't get caught up in too much on the never smoker aspect of it. We want to avoid the blame the victim, and we need to counter stigma. We don't want to suggest that the never smokers deserve our respect and our support more than other people, that no one deserves lung cancer, and we need to all be standing together.
And I think the key is just actually really caring. So it's not to say I forget the stigma as much as just accept it, accept what the history has been, but then accept the history of America. This was a smoking country. I look at lung cancer screening, and some people won't be excited about it because it's between 55 and 80 and they're 30-pack year smokers. And then I say, well, the biggest subgroup within that is our veteran community. And then it's like, hold up. And so these are people. And I think as long as we're making it clear that they're people and we recognize, I think one of the things that's been disappointing is they'll group and say that it's just smokers too. And as a lung cancer community, we have to make sure that we recognize that quitting smoking is one of the most difficult things to do. It's been proven that addiction is so so hard. So if it's a former smoker, which we have, which is the largest group that are being diagnosed right now, we've got to give them the love that says, man, I know that was hard. Right? And then appreciate that because they stopped, that prevention is not going to do anything for them.
Yeah.
So just saying is that the messages are a little bit different in the way that we embrace our potential survivors and our potential people that will be diagnosed. But the key is as a community, we have to accept that they all have value, right? And so where I've seen a stigma, if anyone is treated a certain way because of it, is actually more internal more so than external, because the people outside, they really just don't know anything.
Well, I want to give you both a lot of credit for changing how people feel, because as important as the improving statistics are, which they are, things are way better, we continue to make progress, and those of us who focus on the statistics have plenty to be proud of, but that just doesn't translate the same way as showing people what's possible. What Tabitha says about seeing somebody when you're first diagnosed who is alive and doing well 3 and 5 and more years later, showing what is possible, and not just being a statistic, but being a face and a life. I think that people just resonate with that more. And then, Chris, when you show the example of here is a person in a Rams jersey, you can identify with that person. They could be a member of your family. They have lung cancer, but look at how they are doing. That speaks to people in a way that statistics just can't. Anyway, Chris Draft, thank you so much for joining us. Tabitha, thank you so much. Your perspective really nourishes a lot of people who are in this field as clinicians, and of course, a lot of people who are caregivers and patients. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The West Wind Podcast is a Beacon Medical Interchange production with sound engineering and distribution by Mark Lindsay of Talking Speaker. We hope you'll be motivated to subscribe, whether at BeaconMedIC.com, through iTunes, or through another podcast service. Please also rate it, and I hope you'll be inclined to tell friends and colleagues in real life and on social media. We're always happy to get your suggestions and other input at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. Talk to you again soon.